about that. We'll have Stephanie Leone, product manager for Spark Connect, as well as Martin Grund, a senior staff software engineer, going to have a great talk for you today. And after the session, please don't forget to rate and review the session, as well as hang around for questions if needed. Take it away. Thank you.
Can we get started?
Ja.
Hello?
Ja. Das andere muss einfach reden.
Nein, ist es nicht.
Haben die es ausgemacht?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Hey, hi, a lot of people. It's great to be here. My name is Stefania. I'm a product manager here at Databricks. I'm joined by Martin Grund. He's my engineering counterpart, and today we're really excited to talk about Databricks Connect, powered by Spark Connect, and we're going to show you how you can build on Databricks from anywhere. Before we start, I have a couple of questions. So who prefers to develop in an IDE? Who prefers the notebook? Why do you prefer an IDE over a notebook? Anyone? You're used to it? Anyone else? Okay, hard to understand. Import resolutions. Anything else? Debugging? Anything else? Okay. Easier to productionize. Very good. Cool. Yeah. And who has used Databricks Connect? Who loved it? No, it's a joke. Yeah. So Databricks Connect is basically a way you can use Databricks Connect to develop from your IDE with Databricks. And why are people using it? Because they love IDE-based development. So basically meeting the developers where they are is where you have built your muscle memory, where you're most efficient, and where you can build high-quality software using software engineering best practices, modularizing your code, running unit tests, and so on and so forth. So Databricks Connect has been in Databricks for a long time, and it had a couple of problems. But it also solved a couple of problems. So despite a bit of a cumbersome user experience, people were still using it a lot because it helped or it enabled interactive step-through debugging, high production fidelity because you could actually develop your workload close to the cluster or like run it on the cluster, and it worked with every IDE. But yeah, there were a couple of problems, and those weren't necessarily Databricks Connect problems, but it had a lot to do with how Spark was architectured. So if we look at Spark up until Spark 3.4, it came with a very monolithic architecture. So all the application code would run directly on the Spark driver, and it was really hard to interact with Spark from any language other than SQL. So basically, if you were to build an application, you had to be close to, like the REPL had to basically be like on the driver, and it only worked with languages that had JVM interoperability. So this made it really hard to come up with like developer experiences as we want them today, like to build from your IDE, or also to build like interactive applications on Databricks. But last year, here at the Data and AI Summit, in the keynote, we announced Spark Connect, and in April, we actually GA'd Spark Connect in Apache Spark 3.4. And what Spark Connect does is exactly addressing that problem. So it basically decouples the Spark architecture into a thin client and a server with a well-defined protocol in between. So with that, what we can do today is basically like build on Spark from anywhere. Today, we have like a fully GA'd Python, and Scala is in the works. And what this basically means is that you have something like JDBC for PySpark. So you can embed PySpark in any of your applications. You can use it from your IDEs. And you can also build clients in other programming languages. And we took Spark Connect and built Databricks Connect, a new version basically on Databricks Connect. And what the new version implies is it's now built on Spark Connect. So it has a decoupled client-server architecture where you can use the client in in your IDE or to build data applications, or our partners can use the client to build integrations with Databricks directly. So that sounds really good, but like how simple is that, right? It's a new thing, a new protocol. How does all of that work? So it's actually super simple. Like Databricks Connect is a Python library. You pip install it in your virtual environment. Pick version 13.2. 1.13.2 is out because like everything we're going to show you here will be in that version. And then like the only thing that you really need to do is to configure your Spark session correctly. In Databricks, we suggest using a config profile, and what you basically need to do is to configure to which workspace you want to connect, which cluster it is, and your authentication token. We support various kinds of authentication. We'll go into detail later on. And then in your Spark code, what you do is you create the session from that profile. Once you've done that, you just write Spark, PySpark as you know it. It's really just a session. Everything else, it's the DataFrame API that we're using as the interface to the server, and you can just develop or just run and use with Databricks Connect what you used to use previously. Yeah, and we were saying you can build applications. The thing is, Databricks Connect was used a lot for like remote debugging, but the real power is there's actually much more to it. It gives you remote connectivity, and what we're going to do in the rest of this talk is walk you through like different scenarios on like things you can build on top of Databricks using Databricks Connect. We'll start with an example where we showcase how you can build data apps with just a few lines of code. So you can build a Plotly app using Databricks Connect to query Databricks. You can develop from your IDE. That's what most people already did. And then we also show you how you can integrate, how our partners already integrated. We'll showcase how Dataiku, a low-code ETL platform, now pushes down PySpark to Databricks clusters. And with that, I'll give over to Martin, who will walk you through all the examples.
All right. Again, one thing that's very important to us is that we tried a lot to make sure that all of the examples that we're using here are available on GitHub. So in the Databricks demos repository, Databricks demos organization, there's a DB Connect examples repository where you'll find all of these examples. It's linked in the slides. It will be in the show notes. So it's going to be very easy to use. All right. So where do we start? So we've previously talked about like JDBC for PySpark, you know, this kind of, if you've worked with Plotly before or Dash, like you know how easy it is to essentially use like any kind of a database connector to directly talk to these applications. But at the same time, you know, you have all of this knowledge about PySpark that you want to use, and like how do you integrate your applications directly with your Databricks environment, but at the same time basically deploy this kind of application separately. Why is this so important? If you look today, if you are running any kind of PySpark applications, essentially you're always forced to more or less ship Spark with you. And this makes it really hard to like figure out like where to deploy this. Like we have customers trying to deploy Plotly app inside Databricks, outside Databricks, and it's really hard. With DB Connect, it becomes very easy. Just deploy a tiny Python app in a Docker container, run it in a Kubernetes somewhere, and then all of a sudden you have the full power of PySpark, but connecting to a Databricks environment. All right. How does it look like? Very simple example for a Dash application. Again, as Stefania already mentioned, like you really just create a Spark session. Every time you see like Databricks session and you're like, isn't that really code compatible? Like, is this really awesome? This is really just a little bit of our, like, I would call it enterprisey sprinkles, you know, that we put on top of that make it very easy to authenticate. Spark Connect as a protocol is what's used under the hood. You know, it's all open HTTP2 gRPC-based protocol, so there's no magic there, but you know, at the same time, we want to make sure that for our customers, it's very easy to configure their sessions, so that's why we bring these kind of like simple wrappers around this, but at the end of the day, it's all the same. And the most simple Dash application that I could come up with like in 3 lines is actually this one. So all it does is basically, it reads from a particular table from a data frame, and then like converts this into a Dash table and then displays it. And you know, like, and you can deploy this anywhere. Like if you have a Raspberry Pi running around, lying around somewhere, you deploy this, and it connects to a Spark cluster churning through like billions of records. Or you basically build this kind of application, like this is the sample application that we published that allows you to interactively like go through this NYC taxi data set and like interact with it and like give you this kind of really feeling. All right, there should be something. Let me see. Is there a video coming? Oh, awesome. All right, what I'm showing you here now is essentially in VS Code extension, I'm connected to a cluster. I'm basically configuring my session, and as you can see, this is really traditional notebook style. But what I'm doing here is I'm loading the same kind of map view that you've seen in the screenshot before. And to give you an idea like how easy you can interactively now in your VS Code essentially already build these kind of like dash widgets. So I'm changing kind of like parameters to my function, and it allows me to like preview already what are the things that I can do with it. And like you don't have to run this essentially, like on a notebook somewhere, figure out like how to SSH in, like use Jupyter Gateway, whatsoever. This really just running locally from your laptop or wherever you want to run this. The next example that I want to show you is the more traditional like data engineering piece. Like you want to build an ETL pipeline from your IDE. We saw the show of hands. I mean, there might be a couple of people that like to develop pipelines in notebooks, but I think most of you would say, actually, it's so much more convenient to do this in an IDE. Well, why? Because really, this is like the way, if you grew up with. Like you have this, you have folders, you have structures, you have files, you have modules. You can use all of this very easily. So what we're going to do in this example is really, we're going to load some data from a data source into a bronze table. We're going to transform this data, apply a couple of filters, and then we're going to produce a couple of like consumer-specific views that, just to give you this kind of idea about, okay, so the taxi data set, we're loading, let's say, data from the yellow caps and the green caps, I think it's called in the original data, and then we're producing an overview of the table that only shows the data for the yellow caps and then one only for the green ones. All right, so what I'm going to show you now, if this video is going to load, let's see. All right, let me see if I can, wait, no, where's my mouse? Stop. All right, I'm sorry for this. Let me go to full screen here. Of course. All right, in case this is full screen, let's start this again. All right, so what I'm going to show you here is similarly, I've created a Databricks session. I'm connecting now from my PyCharm IDE here. I'm step debugging through my application, and then I basically dive into the individual methods. And you know what the awesome part is? Every time when you're debugging something and you're interacting with the data frame, you can really like interrogate this data frame like any other thing. So it's like you can run count, you can inspect the schema, you can even perform composition of the data frame, because every time you're performing an operation of a data frame, you're creating a new data frame. And this makes it very convenient to debug this in this IDE, because like if you're, for example, you write your pipeline, you want to know, okay, so am I really filtering out the right records? Is the schema still correct? Of course we should write tests, that's a whole different topic. But like every test is so awesome, but we still make mistakes. And like what's the easiest way for us to really look at this? And because we're humans, we want to reason about this. And that's why debugging in an IDE is so powerful, and in particular with PySpark in this example, because it makes it so easy to really step through these kind of things. All right, so we can see here, like we run our pipeline and everything is awesome. All right, let me see, where's my mouse? In VS Code, it's actually even simpler as well. So if you are connected, if you're using the VS Code extension and you are configured to run on a cluster, you don't have to do anything to really configure the Spark Connect session, like it's done for you in the background. And then, in this example, that's the same example that I have previously, but now I'm basically still running a notebook in the VS Code. I set a breakpoint, I click debug, and I have the same kind of capabilities available. I mean, yes, Jupyter supports as well debugging in a notebook. I mean, that's all awesome. And it's really just, again, it's an example to give you an idea of like what you can do. I can run df.show to get like a table print of the output. I can step through this. I can really reason about like what's actually happening with the data. And again, like with the integration of the VS Code extension, it makes it very easy to, I don't have to remember the pet tokens. I don't have to remember like where all of this is configured, what's the profile is named. I simply select the cluster, hit play more or less, and then this is all that needs to be done. All right. Okay, now I hope that this is the right, all right, we'll figure this out. All right, but not everybody comes with the same knowledge of PySpark. You know, like PySpark itself already takes like a certain amount of effort to understand and learn. And you know, the PySpark APIs don't always feel very Pythonic. You might not know enough, like you might use PySpark only every other week. So, and this is the reason why we have so many partners and so many other companies that we're working with. They're building this kind of low-code, no-code, or analyst-based ETL tools. So for example, here we're working with Dataiku that are essentially offering this kind of capabilities to have very easy push down of SQL into Databricks. When we partnered with them, what we're enabling now is the ability of not only pushing down SQL to Databricks, but as well pushing down PySpark to Databricks. And this PySpark is not pushed down as like an opaque thing that needs to run somewhere, but this is really using DB Connect. What this enables us, and I will show this in a video in a second, is the ability of like performing the composition of the individual steps of your pipeline with the logic that is either, for example, just visual logic, or it is logic that is written in SQL, or logic that is written in PySpark. And what it enables you is the ability to say, I have certain pieces of functionality that's very specific to my use case, my company, my organization, that are much easier to be expressed in PySpark rather than anything else, and you can seamlessly integrate this with the rest of your ETL. All right. So what we're having here is this typical view of Dataiku. You have a visual pipeline. This is split into all the stages, so bronze, silver, and so on. I'm just going to like slowly click through this. So it's going to sample the data from the data sources. So these are really the CSV files. It now feeds into the bronze stage, which loads the data. And what you can see there, the individual steps is essentially, you know, data cleanup steps. What these data cleanup steps do is what we've previously seen. It's the same example as we had in Python code. So it's selecting certain columns, it's dropping columns, it's renaming columns, it's performing certain logic. So for example, if this column equals that, I will perform this logic. And then the data feeds into the, what we call here the silver stage. And in the silver stage, we have a Python operator. What this Python operator is doing is using the wrapping from Databricks, from Dataiku to talk to Databricks using DB Connect. And then I can really embed my complex logic, my application logic into this PySpark code. And when the pipeline is run, this is then pushed out to Databricks. And then here, just to showcase in the end, like we have a SQL operator. I can put any kind of SQL in there. The data gets written out, and then at the end, I have the full result of my pipeline. And as you can see here, like then the data only contains the columns that I'm looking for. It no longer contains the vendor column and so on. So this is really like this kind of great opportunity to mix and match the kind of primitives that you want to use to interact with Dataiku. And with that, I'm giving back to Stefania.
Great. Yeah, so I think we have shown you with like a couple of examples, like many ways how you can connect to Databricks. And we would like, you may ask, okay, but like what's included? Maybe also from those users that have used DB Connect in the past, like what is in there? What can I use in terms of API surface and so on? So basically, DB Connect wraps PySpark, wraps the Databricks SDK for Python, and adds some additional functionality to it. So it really makes it convenient to use PySpark on Databricks with a couple of things that we add on top. In terms of Spark, we offer the full power of Spark. Python, Scala is in the work, and R is to come. We now have support for structured streaming, pandas on Spark, and so on and so forth. So the whole spectrum. Then what we offer on top of that is the Lakehouse enterprise security and data governance. So Databricks Connect interacts with Unity Catalog, so all the data access goes through your user and is fully governed. Data is accessed from the data lake, and in terms of the authentication, we rely on the Databricks SDK for Python, so we offer OAuth support, Azure AD, and PAT token. And yeah, we're going to extend those capabilities even more with time. Yeah, and I think with that, like, so for those who are interested to better understand the protocol underneath, we have another talk on Thursday at 1:30 where we go into more details on Spark Connect and also the protocol. Yeah, and if you have any questions, let us know.